In this video, we're going to take a look at the mesh insert brushes. These brushes are really cool, and they've opened up a lot of new and exciting possibilities for doing concept work inside of ZBrush. So let's take a look at some of this. So let's tap B to bring up the brush menu, and tap I for the I menu for the brushes, and then you can see that we've got quite a few different brushes here that have insert. You can insert a cube, cylinder, there's an ear that comes with the program, a hand, a head, that's a male head, and a female head, lips, nose, and a sphere. Let's go ahead and take a look at the sphere right now. So you can see I can just click and drag on the model, and it's going to insert a sphere for me right there. So I can, right off the bat, hold down Control. Let me go ahead and take this off of rectangle and put it on drag rectangle. I can hold down Control and drag a marquee in the open viewport to get rid of any kind of masking that's on there. And then I can drop that again, and it's going to remesh the surface with this new sphere put in there with this. So if I turn on the polyframe, you can see what it's doing with the geometry. So this is really cool for doing additive kind of sculpting of these different shapes. So again, if I want to put a sphere maybe right here on this portion of the model, you can see I'm just going to add it here. You saw how we were able to add the model and have it join as one piece, as if this is one continuous surface. If we go and pull this up under geometry and look at the Dynamesh section, you can see if we turn on this group option and we remesh, that there's going to be this nice hard edge. That's because if we turn on the polyframe, it's actually kept this new mesh insert as a group, because this group thing is turned on right here. So this is going to keep any of these shapes completely separate. So I'm going to hit undo just to get rid of that shape here. So let's take a look at what happens if we hold down Alt, or if we put on Z sub on here. So if we hold down Alt, you can see our cursor is going to turn to this negative symbol right here, and we're going to draw the sphere out, and it's going to look like it normally would when we draw it out. But this time, when we remesh, it's going to actually subtract away from that shape. So it's kind of a really cool and powerful way of doing really quick Boolean operations, and this is going to open up a lot of cool possibilities for us. So I'm going to draw a sphere out here. I'm going to make it really large, and now I'm going to start using the Transpose tools. So you get the idea of using the insert brushes. Now we need to learn how to actually move these shapes around. So let's go ahead and put this on the move brush and go ahead and click and drag an action line coming off the sphere. Let's just start with move, because this is kind of the simplest one to understand. So you can see an action line. As artists, we draw lines all the time. These lines are actually going to give us some indication of motion. So I can click and drag right here in the middle, and I can move this sphere around. So it's just kind of like a free form movement based off of whatever my camera is looking at. So I'm able to do that, but at the same time I'm actually able to click and drag on here and hold down Shift, and it's going to only drag this model or move this model based upon the vector that we've drawn out for this line. Another thing you can do with this, if you click and drag the line itself, you can move the line around. You can click and drag the outer circle. Make sure you're not in the circle, but if you hover your cursor over this, it'll highlight it, and you can move this. You can change the angle here, and you can do the same thing here. Unfortunately for this tool, if you accidentally click here on the model, it's going to draw a new action line, and there's no undo function for getting you back to drawing that action line. But the whole point of the transpose tools is you're supposed to be able to just really quickly draw out these lines and be able to move, scale, and rotate instead of having to set up a skeletal system like you would in some other packages. So again, if I just drag this out, and if I'm kind of moving this in a circular motion to get the vector that I want, if I hold down Shift, you can see I can actually snap these to different angles. So I can go, straight up vertical or go horizontal with these lines, or I can go at 45 degrees, and that's going to help you along as well. Something to note is when you draw this thing out, sometimes it helps to turn perspective off just to make sure that your lines are in fact straight, and you might want to also check your line from the top to make sure. Sometimes if you have symmetry on, it might be crossed a little bit like this. So everything looks great from the side here, but if we go ahead and move this, you can see how it's going to kind of rip this piece apart. And you might be wanting to make a pill kind of shape, and that might help you, but in our case we just want to move this around. So we're going to have to take this, just drag it, and then hold down Shift, and it's going to snap. So we've got a nice straight line here, and I'm going to go ahead and click and drag while I'm holding down Shift just to get this thing placed just in the right spot where I'm looking for. So if I go ahead and remesh, you can see since we held down Alt before I created that sphere, it's going to go ahead and carve out that shape for me. So this is going to be a really powerful tool for you to quickly make some new shapes just by taking the existing shapes that you have. And I'll just go ahead and move this line here and drag this with Shift. Maybe click on this middle one here and reposition this right here like this. And I'll use that to cut away. So you can see that shape that I've gotten from this process. So let's take a look real quick at dragging out a new sphere. So let me go ahead and put that on Draw. Sorry, I was not on the right tool. I'm going to put that on Move again, click and drag, and move this out. I want to show you just a little bit more about this tool. So I'm going to put this somewhere in the center of this object. And with the Move brush, if I click on these endpoints, I've been showing you how to move everything around with this middle circle. If we use the endpoints right here, just put your cursor in there, you'll see these little red circles. If I click on those and drag, you can see it's going to kind of do this shear, or kind of like a non-proportional scale from this point out. Now if we move the line back here, you can see what it's going to do a little bit better. See how it's going to pull from that point? This can be an easy way for you to just quickly tweak a shape and do some non-proportional scaling on something. Okay, so let's take a look at scale. Scale is going to work with the same line. You have your line drawn out already. You might want to scale from this point up, and this is going to do a uniform scale for you up or down. Scaling in the middle, you can see with the line that we have, it's going to squish or pull this here. If we change the line to this orientation, it's going to go this way for us. And if we scale from this line, it's actually going to use this as a pivot point. So these are vectors and actually pivot points for us to either scale, and you can see I'm going larger or smaller based upon this pivot point here. So for rotate, it's the same thing. We can actually just use this line again, and this, let's say this is my pivot point here. I can click and drag this as a kind of a lever. So if I wanted to rotate right about the center, then I would kind of try to draw this action line and get it lined up right in the center of my object, and then I can just go ahead and rotate just slightly like that. So this is going to give you the different options for actually moving, scaling, and rotating your objects, and that's going to be really important for you when you start to use these different mesh insert tools. So I'm going to hit undo to get myself back to this point where I've carved out the stomach. And maybe I don't have that one. Okay, I'll just draw that out again real quick. So I'm holding down Alt, and I'm going to draw a nice large sphere, put on the move tool, click and drag, move from the middle, just scoot that out just a little bit. Got this here. I'm going to hold down Control, drag a marquee in the open viewport, do that again to remesh, and I've cut away that surface. I'm going to show you a different shape real quick. So let's tap B for brushes, I for all of our eye brushes, and let's go ahead and maybe use this insert cube. So you can see when we actually take this and we drag out, it's going to orientate itself from where it's dragging out on the surface. Now, one thing I've found, it's going to do a uniform scale as you drag out, but then if you go backwards, you can get some kind of cool stretching and non-proportional scaling of things at that point. So you can turn that cube into like a nice stick kind of shape, and you could go ahead and remesh that. I'm going to click and drag that out again until I just have a block. Now, we were taking a look at these different move brushes. So I'm going to actually draw a line from this corner right to here. And like I was saying, you might want to check this from the front and just make it sure it's actually nice and straight, because sometimes it's trying to snap to different vertices on these models that you're not really looking at. So sometimes it doesn't make exact sense, like where it's sticking some of these points that it's snapping to. But you'll kind of get used to it as you use the tools a little bit more. So I want to make this into more of a flat shape. So I'm going to click this point and hold down Shift as I drag. And you can see I'm going to turn that cube into a nice flat shape right here like this, to where I can move this if I want. I can move it around, and I could also put on rotate, and it really doesn't matter where this vector line is for this. You just kind of got to think of this as a lever that you're going to click and drag and pull around. So you could put this at a 90-degree angle if you wanted and push and pull it around. It's just whatever kind of works for you to help you remember how you're going to use that tool. And I'll put it back on the move tool, click on the middle section here just to move that back around. And then I'm going to move my camera view to the top, take this action line and put it right down the center, and click and drag this out. I want to scale this thing down. So I'm just going to click on there until it goes all the way in the surface here. And I can take it on my move tool and click and drag to right here, and I should be able to click this corner here, since I've got a pivot here and I've got symmetry turned on and I'm affecting both sides, I can just click and drag that and make a nice tapered shape and put it back on my rotate tool, and I'll just rotate this down a little bit like this. So now that the shape is drawn, I can hold down Control and drag a marquee in the viewport, do it again to remesh, and now put it back on the draw tool. This has become a new piece of my model. So it's a new part of the shape of the model. So I can go ahead and smooth those results out, and I could try to, incorporate that a little bit better into my model. But I don't really like the look of it. So I'll just go ahead and keep undoing until I get rid of that. Let me go back until I get the shape. So you can see maybe I don't want this here, and maybe you ran out of undos, and say I don't have these masked again. Every time it generates a new shape like this, it's going to make it in its own different group, so it's seen as something different than the rest of the model. And especially if you have this group button turned on, it's going to do that. I'm going to show you real quick how you can hide sections of models if they're grouped this way. You can hold down Control and Shift, and I'm going to click on this piece of my model here, and that's going to hide that other chunk of that model. And if I hold down Control Shift and drag in the open viewport, I can alternate between what is shown and what is hidden. So I'm going to hide that shape, and under Geometry, which we're under Tool, so you go Tool, Geometry, and we have a Delete Hidden right here at the bottom. If we click that, that shape is actually going to be gone, and it's going to be deleted, just like it says. So I'm going to tap P to bring back perspective here. The next thing that I wanted to show you about the mesh insert brushes is that you can actually create your own. So you can see by going in here, brush, we've got these different shapes. And wouldn't it be great to make your own models and put your own shapes in there? Well, ZBrush has given you the ability to do that. So if we look at the brush palette, so if we click brush, click this little guy here and dock it over. If we go to modifiers here, you can see that there's actually an image of what the model is that's sitting inside of here. If we click on that, we can actually replace that with different models that we choose. So you can import your own models in from any other 3D program, and you can start building a library of different shapes. And I've done just that, and I'm going to share all these different shapes with you. If you hit the comma key, I like to go ahead and double click on here, and this is going to take you up a file directory. And let's go up one more, and you can see that there's a directory structure for alphas, brushes, materials. I like to store this all outside of ZBrush. And then using this light box, I can go ahead and easily load some of these things in. So if I double click on brushes, it's a directory that I made. These are all different mesh insert brushes that I've made. So this is kind of like a prehistoric kind of tooth, and this is like a sucker for like an octopus, his leg. Here's a complex kind of pipe, a cone, like a complex drill bit, a tube shape, some flat rectangles that will pull out different ways from the surface, triangles, a gun trigger, jet engine, some wings, some mechanical looking pieces, some triangles, a head. So I've made a bunch of different shapes that were aiding me in being able to really quickly create some stuff that looked really complex. So let's look at this insert mechanical elbow. So if you double click on this, that's going to load it as your new mesh insert brush. So I can go ahead and click and drag right here. And you can see that it's dragged the shape out, but it's obviously not centered how we would like it to sit within the side of here. So I'm going to put this on rotate, and then I'm going to click and drag this out to get this action line. And I'm going to check this. I'm going to move this up a little bit. This is basically going to be our pivot point for our model. And then now I can click and drag and try to sit this model in here a little bit better. And it's up a little too high here, so I can click and drag and kind of just scooch that down just a little bit. You just kind of want to try to ease these pieces in. And we can take the move brush and just kind of slightly move that just a little bit, just like that. And it does look like it's cutting into the surface a little bit here, so I can drag this line down a little bit, clicking and dragging it right there. And I can put it on the scale and just scale it down ever so slightly. And it's still going to insert with that. That's okay. I'm going to put on move, and I'm going to click and drag here because I want to move this thing out just a little bit, but I want to make sure that the angle is correct. So I'm going to click this outer circle and drag just a little bit. Now whenever I drag out holding down shift, I can kind of pull this shape out just a little bit like that. And that's going to give me better results. Put it back on draw, and I don't see any of my model sticking through. Remember we talked in earlier videos about masking and how you can invert a mask. You can hit Control-I to invert that mask, and if there was any kind of intersection here, what I could do is just put on my move brush, so B, tap M, and then click on move, and then I can just click and drag the surface here and pull this thing out just a little bit, just to finesse the shape a little bit more and make sure it is fitting a true circle here. So now if I'm happy with the results, I can hold down Control, drag a marquee to get rid of the mask, and then drag a marquee again, and that's going to regenerate my Dynamesh. So I've just inserted that really complex shape into my model, and now it's part of the model. And we talked about this. The resolution on this is not that great, but again, kind of what we're going for is just, let's make a sketch. Let's explore some different ideas. And if I wasn't talking through this section, we would be able to just really quickly do some of this stuff and move on to another idea. Now you can see there is a resolution to some of these shapes that get inserted in, so I just usually take the smooth brush and just kind of hit that just a little bit. And let's go to the brush insert, so B-I, and then as we import those models in from Lightbox, they do retain here within the brush area, so you can always get back to that. So I'm holding down Alt as I drag this, and if I take this, put on the move brush, move it out just a little bit here, put on rotate, and rotate this at kind of an angle that's working with the head. Put that back on move, and I'll just push this down here. So this is going to cut into my model. And this might not be the best shape for doing that because it's going to have a lot of kind of weird shapes. But we'll see what it makes. So you can see how I've just carved that right into the shape. What would probably work better is if I used a different shape that was more just like a cylinder, which they have B and I for brushes, and then insert, and they do have a cylinder. So I can click and drag from here. I need to hold down Alt before I do that. And you can see I can take it on the move brush here and pull this out. And this is going to give me a cleaner cut into my model. Okay. Now if I hit B and then I for insert, go back to this complex shape. Now if I click and drag out, and I put it back on my move, okay, just checking the different angles before I start moving this thing around. It's a little large, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that on scale. I'm going to pull these two lines together so they don't fight with each other when I'm trying to scale this. And I'm going to scale that down. Put it back on move. And I like how it's sticking out here this far, but I definitely want it to attach down there. And you can see whenever I scale that, it did kind of overlap some of that, so I'm going to undo that real quick and just put this back on scale. See if I can't get a better result for this. So I'm going to put it back on move. Move this up a little bit. And now if I click and drag from here, it should give me a little bit of reference for where I can drag this out. So I want this to be a pivot point for scaling this thing out. And I'm going to put it back on the move. Just want to check it from the top. And now I'm going to click and drag and hold down Shift. And it's going to drag all the way down in there. So it's sitting in there nice. Okay. I'm going to get rid of my mask and then remesh. What you can see if we're like really close to the model, it can give us some not the best results in the world. So like for a shape like this, I would go back and turn on the group right here like this, then remesh. And you can see it's going to you know, just use this shape all by itself, but it's not going to try to make this thing stick to the other section of the model. So you can see with the new mesh insert brushes, there's some really powerful stuff that you can do with these brushes, and there's a lot of different possibilities. And you're not limited by the shapes that they have. You can create your own library of shapes, and I've been making a few of these models here and there, but the sky's the limit for this stuff. You can really go to town with just creating a library of just different complex models that you're going to be able to use when you're creating whatever it is that you're making. Like, right now I'm making something that looks more hard-edged and mechanical like, so that's these shapes are really working well for these type of things. But you might want to have some more organic kind of looking shapes. I'm going to pause this real quick. I'll pull up an image from my website and I'll show you real quick an organic example. So you can see on here I've actually made a Dynasketch, and here was the brushes that I was telling you about, the little suckers and the teeth. So on this guy, if I pull this up, you can see I actually used those teeth to pull out in these different areas. And for the suckers, I made the suckers for his legs, and you can see those being repeated over and over all throughout the body on here. So I know that I'm showing you more mechanical type of shapes, but it doesn't mean you can't take these brushes and create your own work that's going to help you make something that looks really organic and really different in the shapes that you're producing for that kind of work as well. So it's really the sky's kind of the limit for what you're going to be able to do with some of this stuff. You're really only going to be limited by your imagination at this point, and you're not really going to have to worry about the technical requirements for things. One last thing on here, so you can see I was kind of separating this out. I wanted to make sure that this didn't get remeshed in part of the head. If we turn on the polyframe, you can see that this is a different color than this. This means it's in a different group than the body, and then this is kind of an orange color. This is in a different group than the body. And because we have group turned on, these things are not going to be remeshed together. So if I want to have this now be remeshed with part of the body, which I do, I need to get the body and this guy in the same group. So if we hold down Control and Shift and we click on this piece right here, that's going to hide everything but that piece. And if we hold down Control and Shift and drag in the open viewport, that's going to give us the inverse of what we were looking at. So again, we can just keep drawing that in the open viewport all day long and switching these things back and forth. So now that I have these two shapes together, what I can do is go to, we're still under Tools, so let me close that up real quick. Still under Tool, let's go to Polygroups right here. Click and open that up, and then just say Group Visible, and you can see how it's all changed to a new color. That means they're all sharing the same group information now. And if you hit Group Visible again, you can cycle through some different colors. It's up to you what you want to look like. That's not really that important for right now. But if we turn the frame off, and if we hold down Control Shift and just click once in the viewport, that's going to bring back all of our models. And now you can see that this is still orange, that's still in its own group, and then this is all one big giant group. So if we hold down Control and drag in the open viewport, that's going to remesh for us, and now you can see what's happened. It's actually taken that shape and it's actually joined it with the body, just like what we're looking for. But at the same time, it kept this separate. Okay. So that's about the extent of using the mesh insert brushes. I know this video took a while to create and it took a while to go over this section, but there really are a lot of options for using these brushes, and there are a lot of possibilities. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I highlighted some of the things you're going to run into, but some of the things that you can possibly start thinking about to make really cool and really interesting shapes.